Let's talk about one of the biggest game changers in modern Next.js development, server actions. Seriously, if you've ever felt like you're just writing the same boilerplate code over and over and over again for your forms, this is going to be for you. We're going to see how this one feature can radically simplify your code, making all your data mutations safer and just way more efficient. Let's get right into it. So, does this whole song and dance feel familiar? You need a new form. And what does that mean? Well, first you have to spin up a brand new API endpoint. Then you got to write all the client-side fetching logic, probably with a use effect and a use state. And then you're stuck manually juggling every single loading state, error state, and success state. It is a ton of work for what really should be a pretty straightforward task. And this is the before and after. On the left, you see that tangled web we just talked about, all the separate pieces for the traditional approach. You've got client logic, API routes, manual state, it's a lot. And then on the right, that's the future. It's a single, clean function that goes straight from your form right to your database. Next.js just handles all that messy complexity in the middle for you. This isn't just some minor tweak, it's a completely new and frankly much simpler way of thinking about forms. Okay, so let's pull back the curtain on this solution. It's time to properly introduce the hero of our story, the server action itself. So what is a server action really? Well, at its core, it's just an async function that runs on the server. Simple enough. But here's the magic trick. You can call it directly from your React components. That's the part that changes everything. No more creating separate API endpoints. You just write the function, and Next.js builds that bridge between your client and your server for you. It's awesome. Now, here's a super important point. You gotta know which tool to use for the right job. Server actions are specifically designed for mutations. That's any time you need to create, update, or delete data. If you're just reading data, you're gonna stick with the standard data fetching methods you already know and love in server components. So just think of it this way. Server actions for writing, server components for reading. You're probably wondering, okay, but what's happening under the hood here? Well, when you create a server action, Next.js is doing three really key things for you, completely automatically. 1, it spins up a post endpoint behind the scenes. 2, it takes care of serializing your form data. And 3, it manages the entire network request from the client to the server. It's a huge workload, and it's just abstracted away. Okay, so now that we know the what and the why, let's finally look at the how. To use server actions effectively, React gives us this powerful new toolkit with a couple of hooks that are built specifically for handling forms. And the star of this new toolkit, the absolute MVP, is useActionState. This is going to be your go-to hook for almost all of your form-related work. You can think of it like your command center. It manages everything from your loading spinners to success and error messages, all in one neat little package. So what do you actually get when you call this hook? You get 3 incredibly useful things. First up, you get state. This holds the result of your action, like any validation errors or maybe a success message. Second, you get form action, which is a special wrapped version of your function that you pass directly to the form's action prop. And third, you get a simple Boolean, is pending, that tells you if the form is currently submitting or not. So useful. All right, I need you to pay very close attention here because this is the single most common gotcha that trips people up. When you decide to use useActionState, the signature of your server action function changes. It now has to accept the previous state as its very first argument, even before the form data. Forgetting this little detail will cause you a ton of headaches, so please burn this one into your memory. Now, while useActionState is your main workhorse, there is another, more specialized tool called useFormStatus. Its job is much more focused. It's absolutely perfect for when you just need to know the loading state, but you're deep inside a child component, like a reusable submit button. And here it is, the absolute #1 non-negotiable rule for useFormStatus. You cannot, I repeat, cannot use it in the same component that renders the form tag itself. It has to be in a child component that's nested inside that form. If you get this wrong, its pending state will simply never turn true, and you'll be left scratching your head. So let's put it all together. This table makes the choice really simple. If you're in your main form component and you need to manage the whole shebang, errors, success messages, the loading state, you reach for useActionState. If you're building a reusable component inside that form, like a submit button that just needs its own spinner, you use useFormStatus. It's all about putting the right tool in the right place. Let's talk about security for a second, because this is a big one. Here's a non-negotiable rule. You must always validate your form data on the server. Sure, client-side validation is great for a snappy user experience, but it can be bypassed in a heartbeat. Your server is the final gatekeeper, the last line of defense for your data's integrity. And a library like Zod is pretty much the industry standard for making this robust and easy. And here's a little tip when using Zod in your server actions. You should probably prefer the .safeParse method. So why is that? Because instead of just throwing an error that would crash your entire action, it returns this really neat object that tells you if it was successful. And if it wasn't, you get this beautifully formatted error object that you can easily return right back to your form to display helpful inline messages. All right, theory is great, but let's see how this all actually comes together in practice. We're going to walk through the blueprint of a super common server action, creating a new blog post. Okay, so here's the typical flow, the game plan. First, you validate the incoming form data with Zod. If everything looks good, you then save it to your database. Then, and this part is critical, you tell Next.js to revalidate the cache for the posts page, so it fetches the new data and the page actually updates. And finally, you redirect the user over to that page to see their new post. And here's a pro tip that I promise you will save you hours of debugging. The redirect function from Next.js, well, it works by throwing a special internal error. This means if you place it inside a try-catch block, you'll accidentally catch that error, and the redirect will silently fail. So remember, always call redirect after your try-catch block. Wow, we have covered a lot of ground. So let's start to wrap this up with the essential rules of the road, the key principles you really need to remember for success with server actions. So let's distill this all down to a final cheat sheet. Number 1, always start your action files with the useServer directive. 2, make sure your function arguments and what you return are serializable. 3, always validate your inputs and check authorization on the server. 4, after a successful mutation, use revalidate path to update your UI. 5, use the right hook for the right job. Use ActionState for the form, use form_status for the button inside it. And finally, number 6, remember that redirect goes outside your try-catch block. If you can internalize these 6 principles, you have pretty much mastered the core of server actions. So there you have it. Your forms are now dramatically simpler, way more robust, and more secure. But we can actually go one step further. What if you could make them feel completely instantaneous to the user? Like, what if you could update the UI before the server even responds? Well, that's the magic of optimistic UI, and it's exactly what we're going to dive into next.